She thinks I'm too old to fight back.
They thought I'd sign away my home in front of everyone.
"10 days before Thanksgiving, I overheard my daughter whispering in the kitchen, my name, my house, and laughter that wasn't meant for me. She didn't know I was home early, didn't hear the front door open, didn't think I'd stop by unannounced with a sack of canned green beans for the church drive. But I heard her, clear as day. 'I'll handle it,' she said. 'He's too old to fight back.' And then she laughed. That low, rehearsed kind of laugh you give when you're talking about someone beneath you. It stuck with me. Worse than the words was the way she said them. Like I was a worn-out lawn chair she'd finally decided to toss. Before we continue, if this story strikes a chord with you, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments. My name is Ray Mercer. I'm 58 years old, and I live on the east side of Dayton, Ohio, 5 blocks from the I-75 viaduct. I've worked the GM line since 1999. First shift, 6 days a week. I've got the kind of back that tells the weather better than the news. And I've got one house. Nothing fancy. A 3-bedroom ranch I poured my soul into. Built the porch myself. Laid every square of laminate in the kitchen after my wife passed. That house is all I've got left of her. Of us. Of the kind of love that didn't need words every day. Just presence. Her scent is gone now, but some mornings, when the furnace kicks on, and the air gets that first warm push of dust and heat, I swear I catch her shampoo. Or maybe that's just what grief does, leaves phantom traces for you to hold on to. My daughter's name is Emily. She's 31. Always had a polished smile and a sharp tongue. Got that from her mother, I guess. When she was little, Emily used to sit on my lap and brush my mustache with a Barbie comb. Said I looked like a lion. She'd giggle and tell me to roar. Now she barely looks at me at all unless there's company. Then she plays Daughter of the Year. Instagram hugs. Over-the-top praise. Always with that subtle edge of control, like she's managing me the way she manages her husband's calendar. I told myself not to dwell on the whisper I'd overheard. Told myself I'd misheard. That maybe she was talking about her boss or a neighbor. Something, anything, but me. But that night, I opened a beer I didn't want and sat in my truck longer than I needed to. The engine ticked as it cooled. The porch light buzzed overhead, moths circling it like tiny lost satellites, and her words circled me the same way. He's too old to fight back. They didn't just echo, they dug. Every repetition sank deeper, like a screw turning slowly into wood. The next day I went about my usual business. Rake the leaves, slow and deliberate. Watch the rake teeth scratch lines across the damp earth. Picked up a $5 turkey voucher from the Union Hall. The smell of burnt coffee and motor oil clinging to every man in line. Stopped by the old Sears building to check on the vet's winter coat drive. Everything normal, everything routine, except me. I started watching Emily closer. Little things I'd missed before. Things so small you shrug at first. Like how she'd change the Wi-Fi password at the house. My house. Without asking. How she spoke over me in the family group text when I answered someone's question. How she always, somehow managed to bring her new in-laws into conversations about the future of our home. Her husband, Kevin, well, on paper he isn't a bad guy, financial advisor, sharp dresser, drives a black Lexus that never seems to get dusty. But there's a smugness tucked behind his polite smile, a twitch in his jaw whenever he talks about asset alignment and legacy transitions. Words that sound helpful until you hear the undertone, like he's cataloging me. They'd been spending more time at my house lately. Emily said they were helping me organize before winter. She moved my tools, tossed my old thermos, donated my wife's cookbooks, the ones with grease stains and handwritten notes, without asking. "It's clutter, Dad," she said, casual, bright. "You'll feel lighter." But I didn't. I felt hollow. like someone was slowly erasing me in pencil, one gentle stroke at a time. Then came the mail. A thick manila envelope sat on the kitchen counter when I came in from the garage. Left open. My name in the top corner. I almost ignored it. Thought it was some boring refinance ad. But something about the crispness of the paper, the weight of it, made me look closer. Inside was a quitclaim deed. Pre-filled. Ready for signature. It transferred my house to Emily. Effective immediately. Filed by Kevin's office. Signed, but not by me. Just a clean, empty line waiting for my pen. The kind of trick you pull when you think someone isn't reading closely anymore. My hand trembled as I held it. Not from fear, not yet. From insult. From the realization that this was how little they thought of me. I put the envelope back exactly as I'd found it. Sat down in my recliner. The one that's molded to my shape after years of shifts and sore muscles. The furnace clicked on, breathing dry warmth into the room. I sat there, still, the document on the counter behind me like a live wire. All the years I'd paid that mortgage. The extra shifts I'd taken when Emily wanted piano lessons. The hospital bills when her appendix burst. The braces. The college move-in. The first car I co-signed. All of it. And now this? A silent eviction signed in advance. A plan to take the one place I had left that still felt like mine. The next day, I said nothing. I let her waltz in and rearrange my shelves. Toss my spice rack. Talk over me about how much better the kitchen will feel once it's modernized. I nodded. I smiled. But inside me, something clicked. I wasn't afraid anymore. I wasn't confused. I was calculating. At the bank, I requested every statement from the last 5 years. Every withdrawal I'd made to cover her sudden emergencies. Every overdraft protection I'd triggered to bail her out. Every check cashed in her name. At the county clerk's office, I asked to see all open property filings. Sure enough, there it was. The quitclaim deed, queued up. Incomplete without my signature, but flagged for processing. I pulled a copy. Stamped. Dated. Concrete proof that they weren't just dreaming about this. They were already moving. And I saw the timing. Thanksgiving Day. Family gathered. Dinner on the table. And then, the big announcement. Dad is gifting us the house so we can start our own family here. It was theater. All of it. A carefully staged coup dressed up like a sentimental handoff. They thought I'd be too stunned to object. Too embarrassed to fight in front of the grandkids. Too weak to stop them. They were wrong. I didn't fight. I prepared. I called Roger Linsky, my old buddy from high school. Roger was the kid who used to sketch car parts in the margins of his notebooks and dream about law school. Now he's a semi-retired attorney who still wears the same corduroy jacket from senior year and smells faintly of menthols and printer ink. When he answered, his voice was gravelly, amused. "Ray Mercer, haven't heard from you in a while. What's going on?" "I need help," I said, and I told him everything. I showed him the deed, the bank slips, the mailed notices. He didn't say much at first, just listened, his pen scratching across a yellow legal pad. Finally he looked up, eyes calm, sharp. "You want to keep your house and your dignity?" "Yeah." "Then we do this quiet, surgical." Over the next 7 days, we moved fast. Roger drafted a living trust, airtight and notarized, that put the house under my control as sole trustee. He filed it with a certified timestamp, locking the property from unauthorized transfer. He created a formal letter revoking any pending property transactions and served it directly to Kevin's office. We sent everything USPS certified mail, return receipt requested, legal breadcrumbs they couldn't ignore. I made copies, one in my gun safe, one in the church lockbox, a place even Emily wouldn't think to check. The last one I slid beneath the stack of dinner plates I knew would be used on Thanksgiving. Insurance. Quiet, unshakable insurance. Emily still called every night that week. Cheerful, fake. "You excited for the big dinner, Dad?" she asked once, her voice sugar over steel. "Don't forget. You're giving a little speech, I kept my tone even. Sure, I've got something prepared. And I did. Not words, not anger, just proof. Thanksgiving morning, I polished my boots until the leather caught the pale November light. I shaved close, slow, deliberate, the way my father used to before church, buttoned my flannel, pulled on my best jacket, and tucked the manila folder into my arm. On its front, I'd written a single word in black marker. Legacy. Thanksgiving morning started cold and still, the kind of cold that settles into your knees and lingers in your bones, the kind that makes silence sound louder, like the whole street is holding its breath. I poured myself a cup of diner-style coffee from my old drip machine. No cream, no sugar, just like I used to drink it back when every morning meant a shift at the plant. The pot hissed and gurgled as it finished brewing, sending up a thin curl of steam that smelled faintly like burnt toast in steel lunch pails. I stood by the kitchen window, mug warming my hands, and stared out at my frost-laced lawn. 2 squirrels chased each other up the oak by the driveway, their claws scratching tiny grooves into the bark. Across the street, the neighbor's plastic turkey flapped in the wind, its cheap little steaks barely hanging on against the gusts. Inside my chest, something heavier stirred, not nerves, not quite anger either, something quieter but sharper, the feeling of a man who's been underestimated too many times and is finally done playing along. It had been building all week, ever since I found that quitclaim deed, ever since I pieced together their plan, ever since I realized that my daughter, my only daughter, had turned Thanksgiving into a stage for my public undoing. I hadn't told a soul, not the neighbors, not my brother, not the boys at the VFW who always asked if Emily was doing all right. I kept quiet, because that's what men like me do. We wait, we endure, and then, when the time is right, we move with precision. That morning, the phone rang. Emily. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad." Her voice was bright, almost too bright, a rehearsed cheerfulness that bounced off the walls of my kitchen. "We're bringing the stuffing and the Chardonnay. Don't forget your little surprise, okay?" "I won't," I said, steady. She giggled. "You sound so serious." "Just a lot on my mind." She paused for half a beat, enough to notice but not enough to ask. Then she said, "Well, today's a big day for all of us. You'll be the star." Click. Line dead. I stood there with the phone still in my hand, listening to the faint buzz of the dial tone long after she'd hung up. Then I looked down at my hands, calloused, cracked, wrinkled from decades of factory floors and Ohio winters. These were the hands that had paid for her braces, her books, her first car. The hands that had signed tuition checks and pulled double shifts so she could have a wedding at that overpriced Cincinnati venue she'd always dreamed about. The same hands she used to grab when she was little, crossing busy streets without a care. Now she wanted to use them to sign away everything. It didn't stop with the house. In the week leading up to Thanksgiving, I'd started connecting dots I hadn't wanted to see before. At the bank, I'd requested every record they had on me. Stacks of cashier's checks with her name on them. Each one a memory I'd half forgotten until the numbers brought them back. Tuition shortfall, $4,800. Medical emergency, by $200. New tires when her car was unsafe, $900. Credit card rescue when she lost her job, $3,700. All total, $38,642. Almost 40 grand. Gone. And not once had she offered to pay any of it back. I printed the receipts, highlighted each one in yellow, so bright it hurt to look at. Even dug out the withdrawal slip from the day I'd emptied my savings to fund her surprise honeymoon. That was the year I skipped replacing my furnace. She got Maui. I got space heaters. It wasn't just money. It was dismissal, disrespect, erasure. Somewhere along the way, Emily had started telling people I was slipping. Couldn't keep up with the bills. The house was falling apart. It made sense for her and Kevin to take over. They weren't offering to help. They were preparing to replace me. I heard whispers later. At the church potluck, in line at the pharmacy, over stale coffee with old co-workers. Is Ray okay? I heard he might be moving in with his daughter. The hell I was. The day before Thanksgiving, I drove to the county records office, again, just to be sure. The building smelled like damp paper and old ink, like every secret the city had ever kept was stacked somewhere behind those counters. I waited in line behind a guy arguing about a fence permit, hands shoved deep in my jacket, eyes on the floor. When it was my turn, I asked to see property filings again, and there it was, the quitclaim deed, flagged pending. Kevin's firm had already submitted a soft claim to the city's property management system. All it needed was my signature. That was the plan. Emily would smile wide, raise a toast, and slide the document across the table while everyone watched. "Dad's so generous," she'd say. "We're grateful he's letting us take care of the house from now on." And in front of 20 people, siblings, grandkids, Kevin's smug parents, she'd present it as a done deal, like she was giving me the gift of being obsolete. That was their plan, but I had mine. The next morning, before the turkey went in, I drove to the small print shop on 5th. They'd opened early for last-minute holiday rush jobs. The place smelled like ink and warm paper, the whir of copiers drowning out the radio's Christmas music. I picked up 5 bound copies of everything, every receipt, every check, every loan I'd ever given her. On the cover, bold and unmistakable, debt record, Emily Mercer, 2013 to present. I slid them into my manila folder, the one already packed with certified mail receipts, a notarized statement from Roger, and the living trust document that now held my house in an iron grip. No one could pry loose. That was the part they didn't know. They thought they were stealing something unguarded, but I had already moved it beyond reach, legally, permanently. By the time they arrived, my table was ready. The turkey sat in the center, skin lacquered gold from hours of slow roasting. Stuffing spilled over the edges of my grandmother's ceramic bowl. My wife's cranberry orange sauce gleamed jewel red in her old Pyrex dish, the one with the tiny chip on the rim she used to hate. The house smelled like cloves and brown sugar, sage and butter, the kind of smell that makes you think of laughter and home in years gone by. Emily walked in first, beige turtleneck, hair perfect, perfume so strong it caught in the back of my throat. Kevin followed, one arm looped casually around a bottle of Chardonnay like he was bringing peace to a kingdom. They smiled like royalty visiting a loyal subject. Rick, my son, arrived next with his kids tumbling through the doorway. Noisy, hungry, real. My youngest, Molly, showed up later, weary from the drive up from Cincinnati, clutching a pie and rubbing her temples. We hugged, we made small talk. We passed around appetizers, we pretended, until dessert. That's when Emily rose. She clinked her glass gently with a fork. The sound cut through the room like a bell. "Before we dig into Dad's famous pecan pie," she said, smile poised and camera ready, "I just want to say how grateful we are." She turned and beamed at Kevin. He gave a small, self-satisfied nod. Then her gaze landed on me, warm on the surface, sharp underneath. "We're especially thankful for what Dad is doing for us today." A pause, just long enough to pull the whole room into silence. "We're honored to be entrusted with the house, the family legacy, and we promise to take care of it, and him, for as long as needed." Forks stopped midair. Rick's face tightened with confusion. Molly's eyebrows shot up, a silent, "What?" Emily, glowing, held up the manila envelope with the unsigned deed. She waved it like a golden ticket, and I stood. No speech, no anger, just calm. I reached under the table and pulled out my folder. The weight of it was solid, certain, like all the years I'd worked and sacrificed, had been distilled into these pages. I laid it beside the pie, slow and deliberate. "I think you forgot a few pages," I said. Emily blinked. Kevin frowned. I opened the folder. One by one, I spread the documents across the table, like a dealer flipping a royal flush. Check copies, receipts, statements, the trust document, the certified mail logs, and finally, the last page, a notarized revocation of any implied gifts or property transfers. My voice was even as I read. This property is secured within a living trust. Any attempts to alter, assume, or redistribute its ownership without trustee consent are null and void. Kevin's polished smile cracked, just a hairline fracture at first, then deeper as the meaning hit. Emily went pale. The flush drained from her cheeks like someone pulled a plug. She opened her mouth, but no words came. I looked straight at her, steady, quiet, unblinking. "You wanted to be in charge, Emily," I said softly. "Now you can be in charge of explaining this to your husband's firm." No one moved. No one breathed loud enough to break the moment. It was the quietest Thanksgiving I'd ever hosted. The silence after I laid down the folder wasn't just awkward. It was surgical. Not a clink of glass. Not a cough. Not even a breath. The whole dining room seemed to shrink. The warm smell of turkey and cloves hung heavy, but somehow felt cold now, like someone had opened a window that no one could see. Emily's face drained of color. That practiced, camera-ready smile she always wore around Kevin's parents crumpled like wet paper. Kevin sat perfectly still except for his jaw, which twitched once, twice, like he was chewing on shame and couldn't swallow. My son Rick was the first to break. His voice cut through the air, sharp but confused. "What the hell is going on?" Molly didn't speak. She just stared at Emily, pie untouched, her fork frozen halfway to her mouth. I didn't answer. Didn't need to. The document spoke louder than anything I could say. Each page was highlighted, itemized, notarized. Every check, every deposit, every bill I'd paid. Neon yellow lines glowed against the white paper like warning stripes. No drama, just math. The air felt like the second before a tornado touches down. Everything still, vibrating just beneath the surface. Emily finally found her voice. "Dad, this is insane," she stammered, her tone brittle. "You're misunderstanding everything." I met her eyes, steady as the granite countertop behind her. "You forged a deed." "I didn't forge. Kevin just prepared it in advance as a suggestion. You were going to—" "No." My voice was flat, immovable. "I wasn't." Her lower lip trembled. "You're blowing this out of proportion." I stepped closer, folder still in my hand, the weight of it undeniable. "You told your friends I was going senile, that I couldn't manage bills, that this house was falling apart." My eyes didn't leave hers. "I heard you." Her eyes widened, wide enough that for a heartbeat I saw the little girl she used to be. Molly gasped softly behind her napkin. Kevin cleared his throat, an attempt at control. "Ray, let's be reasonable." I turned on him like turning a wrench. "You trespassed into legal territory you had no business touching." He blinked, but I didn't give him space. "You filed a soft claim on my home. You submitted a draft quitclaim deed to the county as if it were just paperwork. You gambled I'd be, too, embarrassed to push back in front of family." "I didn't know," Kevin started, but I cut him off, voice steady and quiet, but sharp enough to cut steel. "You knew. You always knew. You were counting on me being quiet." I let that hang in the air, heavy, final. Then I turned back to the table, to everyone watching. "Every dollar I gave her, I documented. Every emergency, every bailout. I trusted her to pay it forward, not turn it into a dagger." Rick shifted, whispered something low to his wife. I caught the faint, "Can you believe this?" Molly's eyes shimmered, tears threatening to spill but held back. Emily's mouth opened again, but no words came. She sat down, slow, deliberate, like someone trying to vanish into her own seat. I didn't gloat. I didn't yell. Because this wasn't about theatrics. This was about consequences. I turned, calm, and walked out of the dining room. The floor creaked once under my boots. In the kitchen, I poured myself a fresh cup of black coffee. My hands didn't even shake. Behind me, muffled murmurs broke the silence, whispers, shuffling feet. Someone cleared a throat, but thought better of speaking. Rick eventually appeared in the doorway, hesitant but solid. "You all right?" he asked quietly. I nodded. "Yeah." "She really tried to take everything?" he asked, low, almost unbelieving. "She tried to take the house," I said. "The one thing your mother and I built together, and she planned to do it with a round of applause." He exhaled, long and low, the sound of someone trying to wrap his head around betrayal. "Damn." We stood there for a while, two men in flannel shirts on Thanksgiving, staring at a pot of day-old coffee and everything that had almost been lost. He clapped a hand on my shoulder once. No words, just weight and understanding. Then went back to the others. Later that night, after everyone had left, including Emily and Kevin, who practically bolted out the door without meeting my eyes, I sat alone in the living room. The pie sat untouched on the table. The cranberry sauce had hardened at the edges. The house was quiet, but it wasn't the heavy, suffocating quiet that comes with loss. It was clean, light, the kind of quiet that lets you breathe again. I leaned back in my recliner, stared at the ceiling for a long time, and felt something I hadn't in years. Not victory, not revenge, just wholeness. Like a man who'd been disappearing by inches had suddenly come back into focus. The next morning I woke up early. Didn't sleep much, but I felt rested anyway. A strange, new kind of rested, like my spine had grown back an inch overnight. I brewed coffee the same way I always did, the drip machine gurgling while the sky outside turned a soft gray blue. I stood at the kitchen window, mug in hand, and watched the sun lift itself over the bare oak branches. Frost glinted along the edges of the driveway. It was the day after Thanksgiving, and I was still in my house, still the man I'd always been. Only this time I had proof of ownership, of strength, of a backbone I'd worried I'd lost somewhere along the way. Around 10:30 the phone rang. Molly. "Hey, Dad," she said, voice soft, almost shy. "I'm sorry about yesterday." "You didn't do anything wrong," I told her. "I didn't stop anything either," she said. I should have said something. I knew she was acting off. I just didn't know it was this bad. "You were kind. That's enough." I told her not to do it, she whispered. I told her the house wasn't hers to take, but she said you'd go along with it, that you'd be too proud to push back. I didn't answer right away, because in a way Emily was almost right. A year ago, maybe even 6 months ago, I might have gone along just to keep the peace. Let myself be steamrolled to avoid family drama. Signed papers I didn't want to sign. Told myself it was fine. But something had changed. Maybe it was the loneliness. Maybe it was the way my hands ached more at night now. The reminder of a life worked hard and earned. Maybe it was the way people looked at me lately. Like I was disposable, an aging extra in someone else's movie. Or maybe it was just the sound of her voice that night in the kitchen, whispering that I was too old to fight back. She hadn't known what those words would do. Hadn't known they'd wake up a part of me I hadn't touched in decades. The part that builds, fixes, fights. The part that kept working when the plant laid men off. The part that stayed beside my wife through chemo. The part that remembers who I am. A few days later, a letter arrived in the mail. Typed, letterhead, Kevin's firm. It was dry, clinical, a formal withdrawal of the property claim. No apology, no warmth, just one cold line. This matter is considered closed. I pinned it to the fridge, and under it, I taped a photo of Emily when she was 5. Gap-toothed, smiling wide, holding a paper turkey she'd colored in crayon. I didn't hate her, but I couldn't trust her anymore. There's a difference. People think revenge is fire and fury, shouting, smashing, storming out. But sometimes it's just truth, laid bare, quiet, irrefutable, permanent. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't break a plate. I just showed her what I'd kept track of. and let the math speak. It wasn't only my house I saved, it was my self-respect. 3 days after Thanksgiving, the air turned sharp and gray. You could smell the snow coming, that faint scent of cold steel and wet leaves. I stepped outside in my flannel and work boots, breath puffing white, and went about winterizing the place. Took the storm windows down, covered the crawlspace vent with the old plywood cutout I'd used for years, salted the front walk until the crystals crunched underfoot like broken glass, just like every other year. But this year, something was different. The silence in my house wasn't the kind that comes from being alone. It was the kind that comes after a storm. Not devastation, relief. Emily didn't call. Kevin didn't email. No apology. No explanation. No more schemes. Just silence. And in that silence, I got back something I hadn't realized I'd lost. My footing. I started in the garage. For the first time in a long while, I organized it the way I liked. Socket sets went back in their original trays, metal clinking softly as I slotted each piece in its proper place. Paint cans were wiped down, lids tapped tight, labeled in thick black marker by color and date. I swept the concrete until it stopped crunching underfoot, each stroke of the broom cutting through months of quiet neglect. While digging through a stack of donation boxes Emily had left half hidden behind expired oatmeal, I found something that made me stop cold. A shoebox. Inside, my wife's old winter gloves. Faded navy blue, knit cuffs, the faint smell of lavender clinging to them like memory. Emily had tossed them into the donate pile without a second thought. Said once they were dated. Said I should throw them out. But she didn't know, didn't remember how my wife wore those gloves the night our boiler failed mid-January. She'd sat on the basement steps, flashlight in hand, watching me rewire a fuse with frozen fingers, refusing to leave me alone in the cold. Those weren't just gloves. They were history. They were presence. They were love stitched into fabric, and she had almost erased them. That's what stung the most. Not the money, not even the manipulation, the erasure, the quiet replacement of everything I built with her version of modern. But now she couldn't touch it, because it was locked, legally, indisputably, mine. Roger stopped by that Tuesday evening, unannounced as usual, with a six-pack dangling from one hand and a grin on his face. "She take the bait?" he asked the second I opened the door. I nodded. Hook, line, and deed. He chuckled low, that old smoker's laugh, popped open a bottle and handed one to me. "Hell of a move, Ray. That was precision. You didn't just block her. You buried the strategy." "Wasn't about hurting her," I said quietly, twisting the cap off my beer. "Of course not," he replied, settling into a kitchen chair. "It was about making damn sure she couldn't hurt you again." We sat there together, two old guys drinking lukewarm beer under the hum of the kitchen light, surrounded by stacks of certified mail receipts and legal printouts that felt less like paper and more like armor. I slid him the withdrawal letter Kevin's firm had sent. Roger read it once, snorted, and tapped the page with his finger. "They're scared. They know you've got grounds if you want to go nuclear." "I don't? You sure?" His eyes narrowed with that lawyer instinct. I thought about it, about suing, about filing complaints, about burning the whole bridge to ash. But then I looked out the window. Snow had started drifting down, slow, lazy flakes swirling under the security light, landing soft on the deck railing. No sound, no rush, just quiet. "No," I said finally. "She buried herself just fine." Roger smiled at that, the kind of smile men give each other when something righteous has been done. We clinked bottles, no words needed. The next morning I drove out to Sugar Creek, little two-lane road cutting through bare fields and low barns. Wind rattled the truck as I passed mailboxes leaning in the cold. My destination was a tiny stationery shop that still used a manual receipt ledger and smelled like fresh paper and ink. An older woman behind the counter looked up, surprised anyone was out on a day like that. Need cards? I said. Plain cream. No designs. She handed me a box of 20, wrapped in crinkly cellophane. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, the same one that had just hosted the quietest Thanksgiving of my life, and began to write, one card at a time, one grandkid at a time. I told them stories about their mom when she was little, how she once dressed up like a snowman and scared the mailman so bad he dropped a whole stack of letters, how she lined up her teddy bears and gave them report cards with smiley faces, how she used to sit beside me on the porch swing, hair full of static, asking questions about the stars. I told them about the house, what it meant, what it stood for, how it wasn't built with money, but with splinters, sweat, and Saturday afternoons. I didn't mention the trust, didn't talk about legal filings or county offices or strategy. I just wrote, one day this house will be yours to visit, to remember, to carry forward, but not today, and not by force. And I signed each one the same way. With all the quiet love in the world, Grandpa Ray, I stacked them neatly, addressed each envelope in careful block letters, and dropped them at the post office the next morning. Certified mail, of course. Let Emily wonder what was inside. That weekend, Rick stopped by. He brought his boy, my grandson, and a Tupperware container of leftover chili that steamed as soon as we cracked the lid. We ate in the garage with the heater humming. Tools hung neat on the pegboard, the smell of oil and steel comfortable as an old coat. Rick leaned back on the workbench, spoon in hand, eyes on the pegboard full of wrenches and sockets. You ever gonna talk to her again? He asked, after a long, quiet stretch. I shrugged. She wants to talk. She can come here. She can walk through that door, look me in the eye, and own what she did. No shortcuts. No spin. You think she will? I paused, staring at the chilly steam curling in the cold air. I think she might. One day. But only if life humbles her. And if it doesn't, I thought, then so be it. Because some bridges burn for warmth. Rick nodded slow. He chewed another bite, swallowed, then said, almost admiring, She's scared of you now, you know. I smiled a little, sad but real. I'm not scary. No, he said, shaking his head. But you're not soft anymore, either. That stayed with me. Not soft. I'd spent so many years being agreeable, letting people talk over me, thinking staying quiet was the same thing as being kind. But silence without boundaries isn't kindness. It's surrender, and I wasn't surrendering anymore. The Monday after, I was driving down I-675 when Kevin's black Lexus slid past me. For a brief second, our eyes met through the glass. He didn't wave, didn't nod, didn't even flicker acknowledgement, just stared straight ahead, knuckles pale on the steering wheel, jaw locked. That told me everything I needed to know. He knew he'd lost, knew I'd outmaneuvered him without raising my voice once, and I could live with that. Hell, I could thrive with that. Because justice doesn't always arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it comes in envelopes, signatures, and the slow unraveling of a lie. Sometimes it tastes like bitter pie, cold coffee, and freedom. By the time the first real snow finally stuck, the house was quiet again. Really quiet. No fake gratitude. No scheming phone calls. No subtle erasure of a life I built with my own hands. Just me. A fresh fire glowing in the hearth. The hum of a heater that still worked because I paid for it myself. A home intact. And a man no longer invisible. Oh, I didn't hear from Emily for almost 2 months after Thanksgiving. Not a word. Not a text. Not a card tucked inside a recycled envelope like she used to do when she was trying to soften the blow of something. December came and went. The tree stayed in its box that year. Didn't feel right pulling out ornaments when the people who once made them meaningful had turned hollow. The lights stayed tangled in their bin. The house stayed plain, winter gray, quiet. Still, I wasn't angry. Something colder had taken its place. Something quieter. Not spite, but distance. I spent Christmas morning at the shelter downtown. The place smelled like steam trays and instant coffee and damp coats drying by space heaters. I ladled mashed potatoes onto paper plates, handed out rolls, shook hands with men whose eyes carried real loss. Not the kind of loss people perform, but the kind that lives in bones. We traded small talk, weather, football, the price of gas. They didn't know me. I didn't know them. But there was a dignity in the exchange. That night I came home to a dark house, ate reheated stuffing from Thanksgiving, drank a lukewarm beer, and sat by the window while snow fell under the amber streetlight. Flakes drifted sideways, clinging to the porch rail, quieting the whole block. No gifts, no visitors, no manipulation. It was the calmest Christmas I'd had in years. January slid in, cold and brittle. One afternoon I opened the mailbox, and there it was. A small card, plain envelope, no return address, but I knew the handwriting instantly. Emily. Inside, just one sentence. I'm sorry if I went too far. That was it. Not, I'm sorry I tried to steal your house. Not, I betrayed your trust. Not even I lied. Just if. A hedge. A loophole disguised as an apology. I sat at the kitchen table for a while, card in hand, thumb running over the letters until the ink smudged just slightly. Then I slid it into the junk drawer next to expired coupons and loose screws, and closed it softly. That weekend, Rick came by to help clear out the attic. Boots thumped on the old wooden steps as we hauled down boxes. Dust rose in thin beams of light from the single hanging bulb. Man, you've got stuff up here from the 80s, he said, grinning. Probably, I said. He handed down a box labeled Christmas. Old, and we both laughed at the way the tape cracked like old skin. Molly sent a package through the mail that same week. Cookies wrapped in wax paper, tied with twine. No note, just a Sharpie label. For Dad, not for Emily. I chuckled out loud when I saw it, a small, silly gesture. But it landed. Life didn't go back to normal, because normal wasn't something I wanted anymore. What came next was better, solid, undeniable. Mine. I started going back to the VFW hall on Thursday nights. The bar smelled like wood polish and stale beer, same as always. Old guys playing cards, dice rattling, laughter that didn't need to be polite. I joined a small coffee group with a few retirees from the GM line. We swapped stories, complained about back pain, argued over football, and laughed in that rough, easy way men do when they've got nothing left to prove. I pulled the old Ford out of the garage and finally fixed her up. New radiator, brakes that didn't groan, a set of all-weather tires that held steady on slick pavement. Some mornings I'd just drive, no destination, just the road stretching gray under a pale winter sky. AM radio low, heater humming warm against my knees, the sound of freedom in an old engine that still ran because I kept it running. On one of those aimless mornings, I found myself rolling past the elementary school Emily used to attend. It hadn't changed much. Same cracked basketball hoops leaning slightly to one side. Same patchy soccer field pocked with old mole tunnels. Same flagpole rattling softly in the January wind. I pulled over and parked across the street. Sat there for a long while, engine idling, and I thought about that little girl, lunchbox bouncing, knees scabbed, hair a mess, who used to run toward me after class like I was the safest place on earth. Where had she gone? What had happened between scraped knees and forged documents? I don't know. Maybe life twisted her. Maybe ambition got louder than memory. Maybe love, once taken for granted, started to feel like something owed instead of something treasured. But I do know this. She didn't win. Not because I hurt her, but because I stopped letting her hurt me. That's the part people never tell you about revenge. It's not fire. It's not rage. It's boundaries. It's standing up finally and saying, you don't get to rewrite me. You don't get to erase me. You don't get to take what I built. It's showing people, quietly, clearly, that you remember, that you documented, that you refuse to disappear without a sound. A few weeks later, another letter arrived. This one wasn't from Kevin's firm. Different logo, different paper stock, different tone. A law office I didn't recognize. The letter was simple. Emily and Kevin had filed for divorce. Irreconcilable differences. No kids, no shared property. Just two people untangling their lives in black ink. I didn't celebrate, didn't feel vindicated, but I wasn't surprised either. Kevin had married the polished version of Emily, the one who smiled on cue, who performed gratitude, who plotted power moves over pie. When that version cracked, he must have seen what I'd ignored for too long. Early March, Sunday afternoon. I was stirring chili on the stove, ball game low on the TV, when a knock came at the door. Slow, hesitant, I opened it. Emily. No perfect coat, no careful makeup. Just jeans, a sweatshirt, hair pulled back, eyes that looked older, tired. She held a cardboard shoebox in both hands. I didn't invite her in, just stood there waiting. She didn't smile, didn't say hello, just held out the box. These were Mom's, she said, voice small. I found them in my garage, figured they belonged here. I took the box, careful, lifted the lid. Inside, her mother's photo albums, crocheted Christmas stockings, a yellowed cookbook with margin notes in my wife's looping handwriting. I almost threw them out, she said, staring at the porch boards. Then I remembered Thanksgiving. The look on your face. I couldn't. I nodded once. Slow. Cold wind moved between us. I was wrong, she whispered finally. About everything. I thought I was helping. But I was trying to take control. I see that now. Silence stretched. You broke my trust, Emily, I said at last. My voice was calm, but it carried weight. That's not something I hand out twice. I know. Another pause, breath visible between us. I'm not asking for a reset, she said softly. I just wanted you to have these. I looked at the box again, then back at her. You can come in, I said, but just for coffee, not history. Her lips twitched. Not quite a smile, not quite relief. Fair. We sat at the kitchen table. 2 mugs, no sugar, no performance. She didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't spin. We just sat. And in that silence, something settled. Not forgiveness, not yet, but understanding. And that was more than I ever thought I'd get. That night, after she left, I packed the photo albums back on the bookshelf where they'd always belonged. Put the stockings in the hall closet. Ran my hand once across the cracked leather spines of the albums. Then I grabbed my coat and keys. I drove. Out of the city, past the old railroad bridge, through open country roads that didn't ask questions. The sky was low and gray. Snow flurries danced across the windshield. The heater hummed warm and steady. And for the first time in a long time, I felt light. Not because everything was healed, not because the past was fixed, but because I hadn't lost myself in the fire, because I'd stood my ground when it mattered, because I came out whole. If this story struck a chord, hit like, subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments.